D2 for yet another lesson on the theology of development. Theology of development. Allow me at the very onset to say that we are not of this world, but we live in this world. That means, despite the fact that we are heavenly bound, but meanwhile, our existence is here on earth. Therefore, development is an important subject matter that we need to discuss. And I think it's a critical frontier where the church either thrives or the church fails. Therefore, I think it is critical that we learn theology of development. We begin by looking at the subject matter, the definition of development. According to the Right Reverend Wesonga, development is a process of transformation from one state to the other through multiplication of resources and services. Therefore, development is transformation. It's addition. Even in family, even multiplication of family members is considered development. It is multiplication of resources and service. Giving birth, manufacturing, all these are facets of development. According to Motongu, development is using God-given resources. Using God-given resources and abilities. Using God-given resources, capability, and individual strength to generate wealth and to offer services. It is to generate wealth and to offer services, where God-given abilities have been utilized to generate wealth and resources. We say development has taken place. But the most apt definition is development is creating a social environment that enables human beings. It's creating a social environment that enables human beings to fulfill human beings, to attain human fulfillment in all its aspects. You find it's enabling, it's creating a social environment that enables human fulfillment in all its aspects. The first two definitions were limited, but the last definition, development is creating a social environment where a human being can fulfill all its aspects. We can enable human fulfillment in all its aspects. The first aspect is spiritual. The other development was more physical. Development, multiplication of goods and services. The other one was about using your talents to create resources and wealth and to create services. But this one is, it is creating an environment where human beings can achieve their human fulfillment in all its aspects. The first aspect that we look at is the spiritual aspect. The first definition, it is a process of transformation from one state to the other through multiplication of resources and service. Multiplication of resources and services. The second one is utilizing your ability. God-given ability, intellectual and physical strength to generate wealth and offering services. The last one, which I think is more robust, it is creating a social environment that enables human beings to attain human fulfillment in all its aspects. Number one, the first aspect that we need fulfillment is the spiritual. There is the creative, the spiritual, the creative aspect, the social aspect. There is the aesthetic value, the sense of beauty, economics, moral, and care. All these aspects, when they are put together, that is when we say we have achieved development. And this definition captures three critical issues. One, God is central in fulfilling. We need the spiritual element. Sometimes we have emphasized only economical development, building of roads, but we have forgotten that development is holistic. It enables human being to fulfill all its aspects, and God is at the center of development. Number two, it means loving our neighbors. It's not only God, it also deals with our neighbors. And number three, it deals with creation. We talk about sustainable development in the sense that we are going to deal with issues of environment. How are we replenishing the environment that we are destroying to feed ourselves? We need a development that is sustainable, not only for us, but for the future generation. So all those aspects are very critical in development. The moral, the aesthetic, and all those aspects, they are critical aspects of development. So when you talk about development, do not only think of roads, think of the social, think of the aesthetic value. Panda mboga, you don't plant vegetables until the door and you say you're just making money. You need beauty. Beauty is an aspect of development. And the aesthetic value, even the socialization is an aspect of development. Don't be a mice until you don't call people and you say you are developing. You're only developing in one aspect. Human beings need to fulfill all the aspects. The social, the aesthetics, the economic. It's not only one factor. And it talks about God. It talks about our neighbors. And it talks about the environment. Look at what global warming has done. We may have invested in roads, but since we destroyed Mao, now there is no rain, very erratic. Army worms in Mount Elgon. Terrible scenario. Why? Because we need to look at development holistically. And let me have a brief review. A theology of development refers to a theological subfield. It refers to a theological subfield that came into existence through the World Council of Churches. And it is ecumenical motivated. It is a theological subfield that came into existence through the door of the World Council of Churches. And it is ecumenically motivated. It is motivated by a Christian desire to creatively and wholeheartedly be involved in seeking solutions to human social, economical, and practical problems in the contemporary world. So when you do deal with theology of development, you look at it as a church. Through the umbrella of the ecumenical movement, you want to seek economical, social, and practical solutions to real problems in this world. And a theology of development focuses on people-centered development from a practical theological perspective. We are going to look at many centers of how people look at development. But when you look at it from the perspective of theology of development, it should be person-centered. There is an approach that is called POP, people-owned process. If you don't involve the people, they don't own the development. There is a road that I normally make it as an example. There is a road from Mosoriot to the other end. There is no viable matatu in that road. None. From Mosoriot to the Akuru, there is none. Were the people consulted? Was it their priority? None. You get some few pro-box here and there, but the road is underutilized. It's useful, but were the people concerned? And you understand? The problem is, sometimes we do things for people. But when we do things for people, maybe they don't want that. But they don't utilize it. It's underutilized. Because it was not a people-owned process. They don't have ownership. In that way, see your peke, you look at other places, deep or whatever, you have brought people development, but they don't own. I remember in Turkana, when we used to work with ADS, when I used to be a board member, there was a place that I had somewhere with another organization. People build the class. They did not involve the people. Later, wakahitaji watu wachangie padlock. Wasema hapana. Darasa ni yenu. Padlock ni yenu. Hatutachangia. Because it's not a people-owned process. Do you know that our budget from the county is supposed to be anchored on what we call county development plan? And it is supposed to be consultative. They are supposed to call every ward and they give their priorities. And our development should be anchored on county development plan, which is not working. That's why we have political projects and projects that will take you nowhere. Why? Because we do not have the concept of the theology of development. Even in churches, we are the worst ones. There was a vicar, I remember, who started to build the church. When he was transferred, the new vicar came with the project of building the vicarage. What did the Christians do? They went and built the vicarage. The church was left where it was. Why? It was not a project of church members. It was the vicar's process. Now the vicar is gone. What is the purpose of continuing with the project? That's why it is very critical, even as you go to minister. It's very critical that you must understand that people must be involved. That's why the new constitution is a step ahead. There is what we call public participation. Very, very critical. You may think it's a good project, but the project, when there is no ownership, what do people do? They will not support it. They will not see the cost and the need of having such projects. That's why we need a perspective of development that is holistic. A perspective from the theology of development that is people-centered and God is at the center of it. You cannot have a development without God. All these political slogans in Kenya will take us nowhere because it is people's project. And I want to tell you, it will reach nowhere. Take it to the public because it is a person's idea. But if people do not own, especially these loans, and the person does not have the desire to take a loan, they will take the money. Or you give them subsidies, some money. It will go nowhere because the people have not participated. Now, let's look at Nyerere's view of development. Development means the development of people of people, roads, buildings, to increase the crop output, and other things in nature. Other things of this nature. No, the truth is that development, which means the development of people, building of roads, and other things are not development. They are only tools of development. All these things, roads, these are just tools of development. They are not development. That's why I was pointing to the roads. The road there is just a tool of development. If it is not utilized, it is of no sense. Doesn't make any sense. It will only be political capital, but of what use? Of what impact? Therefore, as we look at other aspects of development, let's look at what we call sustainable development. Sustainable development is a concept of development that seeks to provide an environment that promotes a life of dignity, provides a life of dignity, as well as continuation and integrity of supporting the ecosystem. You improve the lives and you maintain the ecosystem. That is what we call sustainable development. Sustainable is the capacity of natural and social systems to survive and thrive together indefinitely. These systems, they survive and thrive together indefinitely. It is the capacity of the natural and social system to survive and thrive together indefinitely. So sustainable development, for those who know, it is to develop and also to maintain the ecosystem. Let's look at some of the basic norms of sustainable development. What we consider as sustainable development. Number one, we have something that is called participation. When you engage in sustainable development, you allow people to participate. You do not decide for them. Number two, sufficiency as commitment to the basic material needs of all life possible. You ensure that there is sufficiency, that people are sustained. Number three, equity, justice for all. When you are dealing with sustainable development, you consider issues of justice and equity. Accountability, which is nobody wants to be involved with. You tell people what is the reality. Accountability. Material simplicity and spiritual richness. When you are engaging in sustainable development, it is material simplicity and spiritual richness. Responsibility on a scale that people can handle. When you engage in sustainable development, you facilitate a process in which people live their life to their full potential. People live their life to their full potential. That is what we mean by sustainable development. And it is my prayer that we will all engage in sustainable development. Now let's look at hindrances to development. What are some of the hindrances that we ever get in development? What are the hindrances to development? Number one, the social structure. We inherited a social structure that is colonial. A social structure that cannot support development. It's very oppressive. Therefore, development cannot take off because of the social structure. Number two, we have weakened social values. Social values, ethos. Social values and efforts, they are wicked. That's why corruption thrives. That's why individualism is at its peak. And that one, we can never have development. You'll find that countries like Singapore, countries like Malaysia, why have they developed? Because they have very strong social values. But with us, we do not have any social values. What are the true values of Kenya as a nation? One is tribalism. Number two, corruption. Two things that people change. That's why development will be very difficult. You will get someone who is very learned, but they don't have any values. What are they going to do? They are going to steal. The engineer will steal. There are roads that are imaginary in Kenya because we do not have social values. People stole money, embezzled resources. The police will arrest wrong people. The judge will imprison wrong people and free the right people. Without social values, there can never be any concrete development. Take it even to the church. Without accountability and social values, we are not going to go anywhere. Number three, inappropriate use of resources. We have very limited resources that are supposed to be used appropriately, be it in the state or the church. But among the hindrances of development is that there is inappropriate use of resources. Simply put, corruption and embezzlement. Have you ever had the concept of double development, where the vicar develops his home from the material of the church building? It's called double development. He pays the contractor, anaweka lori mchanga 5 hapo na kwake mchanga 4, and the church foots the bill. That's what we call inappropriate use of resources. Kanisa ambayo ingejengwa, church that could have been built for 3 years has been built for 20 years because maybe 6 vicars have done that, and that's promoting. That is an hindrance to development. Number 4, there is the global imbalance of commercial power. There is the global imbalance of commercial power. Let's look at the situation right now, Russia and Ukraine. Those people are fighting over what we do not understand. But what are the impacts? The impact is that there is a bigger percentage of oil that comes from Russia, crude oil that comes from Russia. Ammonia, which is the fertilizer, most of it is taken from Russia and Ukraine. You'll find there is a global imbalance of trade. You cannot do trade with America in the same style that they do with you. You don't have any say. They are going to import anything that they want here, but you are not going to access their market. There is imbalance, and according to me, you don't get value for your money. They dictate. They say a beggar has no choice, and that's why it's an hindrance to development. We cannot have genuine development while there is global imbalance of power. There is ideological secularism. Secularism has become a substitute of religion in the name of development. But the development that secularism brings is not a development that is sustainable. And so the idea of freedom, the modern idea of freedom and progress, and the idea of prosperity that is only one-sided based on the material is not sustainable. And that brings a challenge to development. Today, I want us to look at approaches to development. We have looked at the definitions. We have looked at definitions. We have looked at social development, social sustainable development. We have looked at hindrances to development. And today, I want us to examine also the approaches to development. How do certain people approach development? Number 1, let's look at the secular theories. These are theories that do not pretend to be Christian. They are secular in orientation. In fact, Christianity is not their cup of tea. The first one is called the modernization theory. It is the combination of mutual and social changes of a people, which enables them to increase cumulatively and permanently their total real production. Emphasis is on production. Secondly, is to replicate the Western industrialization and technological growth. You want to replicate Western, build cities, build hubs, build big cities and industries. That is what we call modern development. And that's what people present to you these days. We want development, we want to have a factory there. But is there any challenge? Does production means productivity? Sometimes it does not. And you know that as people engage in modern development, as they build cities, they build town, there is a downside to it. Number one, it creates it is a combination of mutual and social changes of a people that enables them to increase cumulatively and permanently their total real production. It entails copying the Western style of development, where you increase factories and industries. But I want to tell you that when you increase factories and industries, it does not mean of necessity that there are no downsides to it. It might not be the solution to the problem. Webuye is a city that sprouted because of pan paper industry. It was modernistic development. People were employed, but it created some social problems in Webuye. Among them is that as you get people, you will get them housed in very cruel, inhumane condition because they are working for cheap labor. You will create social problems. You will have people who will come there and do dirty things just to sustain their livelihood. So modern development is one of the social, secular approaches to development. That you just build industries and it will solve all your problems. The reality on the ground is that not all industries have brought solutions to the problem. Number two, there is what we call the dependency theory. The dependency theory, it argues that advanced industrialized nations are fundamentally opposed to industrialization in poor countries. They are opposed to industrialization in poor countries, and they want poor countries to remain poor by giving them foreign exchange with a lot of interest to cripple them. They give them a lot of interest, foreign exchange with a lot of interest to cripple them. Poor countries are markets for their goods, and they are the regions in the West. So dependency theory says that this is an approach of development where you keep Africans poor. How do you keep them poor? Give them loans at very exorbitant prices. And let them be poor. And when they are poor, they are marketed to your goods. They can't manufacture and sell them to you. It's a theory that is called dependency theory. And some people see that that is what is happening in the contemporary world. It's called dependency theory approach to development. The truth of the matter, that is the reality that is in Africa. Africa is poorer and poorer because of the West have allowed buffoons to pilfer, steal African debts, African loans, diverted into personal interest, and we are paying exorbitant operates. And that will be the status quo for a long time. And that is the projection of people who think about dependency theory of development. The third one is global reform, or the New World Order. It arose out of the dissatisfaction of the poorer dependent nations with their share of world economic pie. You know, the economic pie is this one. And maybe these developed countries may produce, but this is what they get. This one is for the rich countries. So the people were dissatisfied. They needed global reforms. And their predisposition was to challenge seriously the international economic status quo. They wanted more equitable distribution of resources. But when you are poor, who listens to you? Can you be able to change anything when you are poor? When you are poor and you want to sell your sheep for school fees, do you have the bargaining power? You don't. Sometimes it's a joke, you can't do anything. As you go anakuambia anajua utaenda popote, sema kama utaki uenda. And where will you go? Nowhere. That is the challenge. It's too idealistic. And you expect that people will act out of good faith. But this world, everybody is very selfish. So there is what we call the New World Order. The other one is what is called another development. And it posits that development is a whole. Development is a whole. It's holistic. It is ecological. It is cultural. It is social. It is economic and political, economic, institutional, and political dimensions, and can only be understood in their systematic interrelation. It's integrated. This is a new form of approach. It's called another development. It believes that development is integrated, and it aims at reducing poverty, the eradication of poverty. Is it possible to eradicate poverty in this world? The answer could be yes or no, but it's a tall order. It seeks to make people become self-reliant development. People engage in sustainable development. And that development should have economic soundness. It should be ecological soundness. It should be ecologically sound. This development is very idealistic. And this development might not really do a lot. There is another development that is called liberation or Marxist development. This is the development that takes place when people stop exploiting fellow human beings. Marxist or liberation model. It's a kind of development that is achieved when people stop exploiting their fellow human beings in the process of production and distribution of economic gains. It looks at an idealistic society which must overcome discrimination and other social injustices for it to claim to have experienced development. If there is still injustice, if there is still unfair distribution of wages, there is no development. According to the Marxist model, development is when we reduce exploitation and injustice. I think we are going to end there for today. We have looked at certain critical aspects of development in a nutshell. We have defined development according to Wesson, where it says development is change from one state to another. It could be multiplication of industries, birth, all those are forms of development. We have also looked at Motombu's perspective of development, where we utilize God-given talent and ability. And we have looked at a holistic definition of development, where it's creating a social environment in which human fulfillment is achieved in all its aspects. The economic, creative, aesthetics, caring. God is at the center. In this holistic development, God is at the center. We also look at our neighbors and the ecological soundness of this form of development. We took time to look at sustainable development, where development goes hand in hand with the ecological soundness. We have also endeavored and belabored to look at how we can achieve sustainable development. From there, we looked at some of the hindrances to development. That includes corruption, imbalance, trade. We have looked at lack of social values. All those are hindrances to development. Lastly, we looked at approaches to development. And as we looked at approaches to development, we looked at the economic approach. We looked at another development. And we also looked at Marxist model of development. Tomorrow, we are going to look at other forms of development in the morning. The first lesson, we are going to look at transformational development. We are going to look at Freudian development. We are going to look at other forms of development that are not necessarily secular in orientation. But as I conclude, I want to tell you development should be holistic. Don't build a house and say that is development. There are other aspects that are involved. And we must always be thinking of holistic development. May the Lord richly bless you as you contemplate on development. Tomorrow, go and digest this information, and tomorrow we'll begin with questions before we proceed. May the Lord richly bless you and have a pleasant night rest. The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, as we look at development, study it, and examine how we have not looked at the holistic aspect of development. Dear Lord, remind us that you are the core, the center, and the mover of development. I pray your divine guidance as we contemplate on this great aspect. And I pray that as we go out, may we be agents and tools of development to transform lives to the glory and honor of your holy name and for the advancement of your kingdom. That we are going to get real solutions to real problems. That we will not live in an ivory tower, but a real world to the glory and honor of your name. It is in Jesus' name we pray with thanksgiving. Amen. The Lord be with you. And also be with you.